At the end of November, the band was done with, performing at the football games. All of our instruments and uniforms and everything, music turned in. And then it was Christmas break. But somehow during that time, the NFL made a decision, let's invite the Michigan band to perform at the Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl was going to be in about 3 weeks' time.
Hello, and welcome to episode 19 of the BandWagon podcast for the week of July 1st, 2024. On this edition of the program, news and notes from the band world, including a pair of band world obituaries, a 4th of July parade story, a follow-up to last week's drum corps Get Off My Lawn segment, and I have a conversation with a bandmate of mine who was in the room where it happened, and you'll understand what I mean once you hear it. I'm your host, Rob Hammerton. Hello, dear listener. This week's episode is indeed within shouting distance of the 4th of July, and what American holiday is more band-related than that, other than Memorial Day, Graduation Day, New Year's Day, Thanksgiving Day, John Philip Sousa's birthday, DCI Finals. Yeah, okay, but honestly, a 4th of July without a band is like, I don't know, fill in your analogy. And maybe send it to me. heybandwagon.yahoo.com. Anyway, summer's here. I'm for that. So, refill your water bottle, apply more sunscreen, and pull that rubber band around your flip folder. Let's play the first strain. In this episode's first strain, news and notes from the band world. Dateline, Pittsburg, Kansas. On June 8th, Pittsburg State University professor Craig Fuchs passed away at the age of 62. During his 24 years at Pitt State, Fuchs served as director of bands, chair of the music department, director of the Honors College, and director of the Bachelor of General Studies program. Fuchs was diagnosed in early 2022 with ALS, a neurodegenerative disease that affects nerve cells in the brain and the spinal cord. He retired in 2023. Under his leadership, the Pitt State Wind Ensemble performed at the 2006, 2009, 2011, and 2016 KMEA music conventions and was invited to perform at Lincoln Center in New York City in April 2015. In 2001 and 2012, Fuchs was honored with the Robert K. Ratzlaff Outstanding Faculty Award by the Pitt State Student Government Association. In 2023, he was inducted into the Kansas Music Educators Association Hall of Fame. Fuchs had been in demand as a conductor and clinician for regional and district honor bands, and he maintained an active schedule as an adjudicator in the marching band arena each fall. He was a guest conductor in England, France, the Netherlands, Brazil, and Paraguay, and he was the inaugural conductor and artistic director of the 4-state Symphonic Winds. And for 13 seasons, he performed as a member of the TD Pack Band, the official band of the NFL's Kansas City Chiefs. Dateline, Birmingham, Alabama. On June 12th, longtime Alabama band director Arthur Means, Jr. passed away. Means began teaching at George Washington Carver High School in Birmingham in 1958, serving as band director there for 37 years. After he retired from George Washington Carver in 1995, Means began directing the marching band at Miles College in Fairfield, Alabama. Starting with just 32 students, he soon grew the Purple Marching Machine to 200. The band competed in competitions including the HBCU's National Battle of the Bands and marched in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York City in 2003. Means directed the Miles College Marching Band until he retired again in 2006. In a statement, Cook County President Taylor Bishop said, quote, Mr. Means motivated a generation of students to excel in the fields of medicine, law, education, technology, and religion, and those following in his footsteps in music and becoming band directors themselves. In 2018, commemorating his years of service, George Washington Carver High School established the Arthur Means Fine Arts Complex for health professions, engineering, and technology. That's news and notes from the band world for this week. If you have a news item you think should be included in this segment, send me a link via email to heybandwagon@yahoo.com. After a brief break, I'll return with a nod to this week's national holiday. Do stay with us, please. Okay, let's pick it up at the second strain. In this week's Second Strain, a little story of parades and the band world's circle of life. The first 4th of July parade I ever saw was in Chatham, Massachusetts, when I was probably 3 or 4 years old. For those listeners who have been with me for a few weeks, no, this story doesn't feature the Chatham Band under Whit Tileston's leadership, although as I think of it now, they probably were rolling along that parade route on a flatbed truck because that's the way they do parades. And, as has been demonstrated to me since, that is a perfectly legit way of doing a parade. Plenty of community bands, my own included, consist mainly of people who are not up for marching a 3-mile parade, regardless of the high temperature of the day. If band is a place for everyone, then rolling band is a fine version of band. However you do it, you do it. Anyway, my childhood memories of 4th of July parades come from that Chatham parade and from the one that has taken place on the streets of Sudbury, Massachusetts, well, since God was a kid, as the saying goes. Now, something you have to understand about the town of Sudbury, if you've not been there, is that there is a section of town known as the Historic District. If you want to build anything there, house, store, whatever, it has to look very much like houses and stores looked during the time we lovingly call colonial America, the 1770s. The town is very strict about this. The Methodist Church in Sudbury, wherein I grew up, is located just around the corner from what used to be the town center, until larger shopping strip malls and such were built a couple miles down the road, and as you know, commerce can determine just exactly where a town center is. But from the late 1700s until just a few decades ago, the Sudbury Town Center was an intersection of 2 or 3 well-traveled secondary roads with the Unitarian and Presbyterian churches each on their own corner, and the old town hall and fire station on another corner. And the original 18th century road signs were, and are, still there. Stone markers in the ground looking like gravestones reading Boston 22 miles, with an arrow pointing east down one road. The town's look is so stereotypically American Revolution era that you will be unsurprised to learn that its zip code is 01776. I've often wondered just how much money changed hands when the federal government was assigning zip codes in the effort to snare that particular one, particularly considering that the towns of Lexington and Concord are right up the road. Meanwhile, I was now a little kid of 6 or 7 whose family was deciding to make Sudbury's 4th of July parade our regular 4th of July event. The aforementioned Methodist church around the corner from the end of the parade route had a parking lot that was, in a word, gargantuan. Legendary. People refer to our church as the church with the parking lot. So we parked there, set up our lawn chairs by the side of the road, and watched as first the fire engines, then the police officers mounted on horseback, and then the rest of the parade went by. The rest of the parade included flatbed trucks converted into floats, and politicians walking by and waving, and fife and drum corps, and Shriners groups on those low-slung 3-wheel motorbikes of theirs, and groups of musket-wielding Revolutionary War reenactors, it was New England after all, and bands. If my first band-watching experience with the Chatham Band was largely a case of sitting 40 or 50 yards away from a bandstand, then my first parade-based band-watching experience, at least the one that I was definitely conscious of and which I definitely remember now, was a very much more up-close and personal one at the Sudbury Parade. There were adult community bands that actually did march. There were youth bands. There were the occasional band-looking groups that I would come to recognize in later life as having been actual drum and bugle corps. There were sharp military-style uniforms, and there were black pants topped by white button-down shirts. And since the parade was a very gentle but still real 2-mile uphill grade, by the time I saw those bands, some of them were looking a bit bedraggled. But until I got to be a 4th grader and had marched in my first parade with my town's elementary school band, I didn't think about the sweat, or about the fact that a lot of those marchers were definitely no longer marching with military bearing, but instead were just climbing the last quarter mile before they could get to the school bus that would take them back to the parade's starting line and their cars. With the air conditioning, I just saw bands, up close and personal. That experience has reminded me, anytime I've marched in a parade, that parades can be both a pain in the neck and a huge opportunity to plant musical seeds. I'm the weirdo that actually enjoys parades, and in college I was probably one of the handful of folks who did. Partly, it's cool, you don't have to remember drill, you just guide right and maintain your distance from the person in front of you. But mostly, I have often glanced to the side, I've seen a little kid sitting on the curb staring up at this colossus of a band, and who knows? My sweaty face and slightly staggering gait might, even so, have represented the moment that somebody decided they wanted to do that one day. And the activity lives. All right, let's go to parade rest for a moment, and then on the other side of the break, we'll step off again. Hope you'll stick around. Okay, let's change keys and get into the trio section. This week in the trio section, for the first time in this podcast series, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to chat with a current bandmate of mine, someone I'm actually in the same actual band with at the same actual time, currently, right now. And we had a conversation after rehearsal sometime last year, I feel like, and this gentleman uttered one sentence that caused me to think, okay, I need to know more about that. And at the time, I didn't have an obvious vehicle to pursue that darn cool topic, and now I do, and this is it. So please help me welcome to the program, Joe McMULLEN. Joe.
Hello.
Good to see you from closer than 3 rows back. The topic that I have mentioned, I am sure we're going to get to. And in order to get to that, I tend to lead off with some questions that allow people to get a tiny bit of framework into which to place what we're going to talk about. So I'll start with my first question, which is, what's your primary instrument?
My primary instrument is euphonium. In the past, I played French horn. I played E-flat baritone horn. And sousaphone I tried, and also the baritone horn. And yes, there is a difference between a euphonium and a baritone, but I won't go into that right now.
Could come back to it. I'm willing.
And besides band instruments, I play piano and guitar.
So what got you started on playing euphonium, or did you start playing euphonium?
No, I started off in high school as a French horn player. And when I went to University of Michigan, I auditioned for a marching band on French horn. The director told me, come back in September and we'll have you on alto horn, which I had never seen before.
Huh.
So I spent 1 year playing alto horn, and then I decided I think euphonium would be cooler.
Huh?
So that's what I've been doing. And I did go back to playing horn in concert band and different groups, but right now euphonium is my go-to instrument.
What's your current band-related role?
Well, euphonium player, I guess. With the Amherst Town Band, I'm also the publicity manager, and I manage the website. I'm on the board also for the Amherst Town Band, making decisions about concerts and how we deal with weather issues and the kind of things that we're familiar with.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Clearly from our introduction, I know you from somewhere, and it happens to be the Neshoba Valley Concert Band. What bands have you been active with in your life, whether playing or in any other capacity?
Well, I'm currently a member of the Amherst Town Band in New Hampshire. I've been with them over 30 years. The past year, I've been with the Lawrence Italian American Band, which is kind of cool. It's kind of a small group that you see playing at some of the festivals in the North End in Boston and different parades everywhere. So that's kind of fun. I was a longtime member of the Hollis Town Band in New Hampshire and a couple of other groups. I played in a couple of pit orchestras also on horn.
You're in the Neshoba Valley Band, and I'm late to this realization. You're one of a good number of us who play in multiple community bands, and I will confess that before I got into the community band thing, I didn't realize that was something that happened, but clearly it does.
Oh, yes, and it is. And in New England, there's so many opportunities for community bands, town bands that you don't see elsewhere. And I grew up in Michigan. I think there was, one local community band that was, near me at that time, but it was kind of rare. And I've known some people who have moved away from the area, and they're struggling to find groups to play in. So yeah, we're very fortunate around here.
One of the first things I did when I first sat in with Neshoba Valley was to go to the internet and look up community bands in Massachusetts, because I had known of a few of them that friends of mine had been involved with, but I literally didn't have any idea. And I got to the webpage that I think was from the Association of Concert Bands, but don't quote me. And the state is littered with them. I was so struck.
Yes, in fact, so when the pandemic happened and, my other groups were on pause for a while, I was looking for a group to get back into. I remember hearing about the Harvard Town Band, searched for them, and then came across the Neshoba Valley Concert Band. And that led me to joining yet another group.
So we haven't exactly buried the lead here, but there was mention of the Michigan band. And anytime a band person hears that, I'm presuming that they're kind of going, oh, let's talk about this a little bit, because it's only the kind of the progenitor band, or certainly one of them for the band activity in this country. Anyway, growing up in Michigan, I can imagine that you had some sense. I mean, who doesn't in the band world have a sense as to what the Michigan band is about? But what brought you to Michigan?
Well, my older brother had gone to Michigan, so I applied there. I also applied to a few other schools, but it was local. I got a good scholarship, so it was a no-brainer, really. It wasn't really a big thing for me to immediately join this marching band, but I thought, well, that'd be kind of cool. And when I went to sort of an orientation, spent a couple of days, before school started, and ran into some people who I became very good friends with, who said, "Oh yeah, we're going to have this audition. You should go to the School of Music, try out." And I said, "Okay, try it. Sure, why not?" And then, of course, I got into it, and then I wasted too much of my my school career in different bands. Besides the marching band, I was in pep bands for basketball, for hockey, some concert bands. I was in the Kappa Kappa Psi, honorary music fraternity. So I did way too much, you know. And, as a result, I'm still doing this kind of stuff, but, it was all good.
Were you a music major or a major in
No, I
something
was
else?
not a music major. I did consider that at one point, but no, I was got a degree in journalism.
This is hitting me where I live. I started as a journalism major.
Oh yeah,
I just had a little moment of, oh, that's cool.
yeah.
The sentence that you uttered when we were chatting quite a while ago, though, had something to do with a particular appearance that the Michigan band did while you were in it. And I think it's safe to say I don't know anybody who's had this experience, genuinely.
Yeah, I did a little research here, but the if you look at the entertainment that's been set up for the Super Bowl, and there's been 58 of them so far. You look at the list of all the performers. The first 20 years or so, mostly were college marching bands that performed. So starting off with schools like University of Arizona, Grambling State, Florida A&M, University of Texas, USC. I think it went back to football games. What did you do for entertainment at halftime? You get a marching band, or you get some performers. So, some of these early shows, they had marching bands, and they might bring in some other guest artists, such as Carol Channing or Ella Fitzgerald. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and this is considered great entertainment. The NFL thought it was a good idea, but then somehow in the last maybe 25, 30 years, that all changed. Let's make this into a big event. And you bring in groups like Aerosmith, Prince, Rolling Stones, and more recently, Beyonce, Bruno Mars, Lady Gaga. And suddenly it's, not just some people on a field, but it's a whole multiple stages, light shows. It's dozens of singers and dancers and musicians and pyrotechnics. That's cool. I mean, and I guess some people could look back and say, these early things are a little bit primitive and kind of old fashioned, but I think there's I don't know, something appealing about kind of the simpler format that they had then. But it's kind of interesting how this particular Super Bowl 7 in 1973, and how the band got involved in it, and kind of really kind of weird how sort of unorganized or last minute the whole preparations were.
Huh.
So at the end of November, the band was done with, performing at the football games. All of our instruments and uniforms and everything, music turned in. And then it was Christmas break. But somehow during that time, the NFL made a decision, let's invite the Michigan band to perform at the Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl was going to be in about 3 weeks' time. In those days, the Super Bowl was much earlier. There was fewer teams, not as many playoffs. So Super Bowl was scheduled for January 14th. All the students were on break. Then the School of Music got this invitation from the NFL to perform. So they sent out letters. This was before email.
Yeah.
Sent letters to everybody. If you're interested in playing, please respond immediately. Send this letter back, right? And also, the NFL is going to limit the number of people that they can send. So we had a band of 214 that year. They were going to pay for 140. So you had to respond immediately. So that was like 3 weeks before the game. So then those that heard about it okay, we're going to have rehearsals starting January 8th or something, like before the school even started the second semester.
Holy smokes.
And we had 4 days of rehearsals, day and night. We did one rehearsal outdoors.
January in Ann Arbor.
So while this was all done, okay, what's the theme of the show? So it was suggested it would be called something like Happiness Is. Woody Herman, the big band leader, was signed up to perform a couple of songs with the band. And we probably have some other guest artists. We had an arranger, Jerry Billick, immediately wrote a bunch of new charts that we rehearsed for a couple of days. And then we flew out to Los Angeles and spent a couple of days rehearsing, and we were at the UCLA campus. But again, to go on about how sort of unorganized it was or last minute, then it was identified that Sammy Davis Jr. was going to perform also. So we had our arranger come up with a new arrangement of one of his songs. After 1 day of rehearsal, apparently Sammy Davis's agent says, Sammy's not available. So scrap that. We're going to get Andy Williams. Oh, I forgot it was one other thing. Before that, it was going to be Barbra Streisand. Barbra Streisand was going to perform, and we had it already an arrangement of people from Funny Girl. She was going to do it. She dropped out. Sammy Davis was going to do it. He dropped out. Well, let's get Andy Williams. Andy Williams agreed to do it. And then our arranger pulled an all-nighter while he's in California, coming up with another chart.
By hand, not with Sibelius, not with
Finale. Not Sibelius. And all the charts were passed out to people, and we rehearsed it. And the day of the game, we did have one rehearsal in Los Angeles Coliseum, quick run through. We also had a choir from one of the local colleges sang with Andy. So it was kind of weird, but a lot of fun.
I am struck by how on the fly it was. And I think that anybody watching Super Bowl halftimes now, if you think even quickly about it, you're thinking, okay, that had to take a lot of planning. They had to be working out all of it's complicated enough now that you would not want to start work on it any later than Memorial Day. It strikes me. I mean, just to book the act to begin with, but then also to figure out all the logistics of all the everybody. It's not as if even a scaled down Michigan band, you would think it would be that much easier to put something like that together in the space of, I'm doing the calculations. This is weeks and not many of them.
Not even weeks, really. It's like probably a total of 7 or 8 days of rehearsal.
Clearly, it was in a moment where entertainers felt pretty comfortable about saying, I can't do the Super Bowl, I'm booked.
Or my agent says I can't do it.
Yeah.
I should, right.
Trying to process the idea of putting this thing together and having to revise and revise and revise, head exploding.
Yes, and I don't know if this was, similar for some of the other bands that performed over the years, but I doubt it. It was weird, but it was a lot of fun. I was just there to play my alto horn, try to, get my spot in the formations. But the people who are making all the arrangements and the changing things and writing music, I mean, that was a lot to do.
If you're taking your band anywhere, nothing goes exactly as planned, but this seems like it's an exponential level more.
Yeah.
I feel like this is my opportunity to ask questions about one little topic that I definitely was not expecting to talk about, but it sent me back to a memory of when I was in graduate school at Boston University, and the band director that I worked for and I went into a storage room at BU. He said to me, we've got to clean some stuff out, and we were finding instruments from days gone by, but I, the woodwind guy, was looking at this horn that looked like it was somewhere a midpoint between instruments that I knew of. And you talked about the E-flat alto horn, and we actually looked at one and figured out that that's what it must be. But I have zero experience with the alto horn. I wonder how much you could talk about that.
Now, a lot of marching bands use the F horn, so like a mellophone or whatever, to cover the, it would be the French horn part.
Yep.
Back in those days, the old days, it was, okay, they just use these E-flat instruments. But these are still very common in European bands. So I was going to mention later that I lived in England for a while. I played in a brass group. So the instrumentation included cornets, euphoniums, trombones, two types of tubas, flugelhorn, and also what they called tenor horn, but it was the same. We called it alto horn. They called it tenor horn. It was a B flat horn. And in that kind of group, it would typically cover what in American bands would be like a saxophone part or whatever. Whereas the baritone, again, is kind of covering some of the inner voices, and the euphonium is more of a solo instrument.
Which brings me around to what you mentioned before, and I definitely wanted to get to it. Well, I definitely know that there's a difference between the baritone horn and the euphonium. You might be a much better person to explain it, actually.
I'm not sure I really can. I know you can Google it. There's videos and people go into great detail, but it goes into what kind of bore is it? Is it conical or is it something else? And you can make the comparison between a trumpet and a cornet, because again, is it a straight kind of bell or is it flaring or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And the voicing is different. A true baritone has a brighter sound. Euphonium is a little bit deeper, kind of a mellow sound.
So for those of us Yahoo arrangers who kind of interchange them, we need to get educated.
Well, I mean, the thing is, most of the band arrangements you see here in the United States, baritone, euphonium, it's the same part. So yeah, you could use either instrument and cover those parts, but in a brass band, totally different arrangements, totally different sound, different, it's written differently. The story I tell is if you're a euphonium player, you're kind of like Rodney Dangerfield, you get no respect because people say, what do you play? Euphonium. What's that? Baritone horn. Not really, but euphonium, that's a baby tuba. Nah, not really. No. It's its own cool instrument, but people who get it, know.
And I think that's why I wanted you to talk about that rather than just putting a link in the show notes to a Wikipedia article about that sort of thing, because the people who are in it have a perspective on it that for sure this tenor saxophone player does not. And the tenor saxophone always doubles the baritone.
Right.
So they're, of course, totally interchangeable. No, but... So yeah, in the spirit of learning a lot, which I have, and I look forward to learning a little bit more, I always complete these conversations by asking some quick hit questions whose answers tend not to show up on people's resumes exactly. So first, what's one of your favorite pieces of band music that you've played?
I love the Holst suites. Those are a lot of fun. And I love marches. I guess my favorite march of all time is the National Emblem March.
I'm trying to think of which of our bandmates sidled up to me before a gig and said, yeah, it's the National Emblem. It's best known as the best march that Sousa never wrote.
Exactly.
Is there a band that you'd like to perform with that you haven't, either because you're not the right age or you're not in the right place in the world or don't live in the right time?
Every December, I play in these Tuba Christmas events. So for those who don't know what that is.
Where you been?
Yeah, Tuba Christmas is these events where there's an ensemble of tuba, euphoniums, and baritones. So it's 4-part harmony generally of Christmas carols, basically. These events take place throughout the country. There's some international tuba Christmases. I typically do 2 or 3 in the area. I've played in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine. One time I did the Tuba Christmas in Boston at Faneuil Hall. So that was over 100 people playing in the cold. The one I'd always like to do is the Tuba Christmas at Rockefeller Center in New York City. That would be cool to do that.
And this last question, I always look forward to asking it because people take the answers in all kinds of different directions. But I wonder if you have a favorite band story you want to tell.
So I mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to live in England for 3 years. The employer at the time, I managed to get an international assignment, and I lived in southeastern England, not too far from London. One of the first things I did when I moved there was to find a band to play in. And again, the brass band community is very big, especially in northern England. But it's in the south. There were a couple that I tried out with, and I ended up in one that is in a village along the Thames River. That's kind of cool. it was just so much fun to play in that band, to play different kind of band literature. It's a much different sound. And to be able to play it, things like a town bandstand or village fete or an old parish church. But we also did opportunity to play at Regent's Park in London. And we also did a trip for a band festival in the Netherlands. That was fun, and I, love to do something like that again.
About the only way that American band people will have a real good idea about that is to look at the movie Brassed Off, I can imagine.
Yeah, it was much like that, and that movie they did contests, and this band I was in also did contests all the time.
Well, it has been such a pleasure to talk with you. Usually the majority of our conversation is from, as I say, 3 band rows away on the rare occasions when I actually give the euphoniums a dang cue. Is there somewhere online that people can find you?
Check the Amherst Town Band. If you send a message to the webmaster or to info@Amherst Town Band, I'll see it. Yeah, I was very, very satisfied that we had a couple people just join our band. And how did you find out about it? We searched, we found the website, so must be doing something right.
Well, always a pleasure doing business with you, and looking forward to our gig tonight as we record.
Yes, and the weather actually looks pretty decent for once. So
hallelujah. Euphonium, alto horn, French horn, pianist Joe McMULLEN. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a quick break, and on the other side of that, I will return with some wise advice about how to watch drum corps and bands humanely. Hope you'll stick around. Here comes the dogfight. As I mentioned in this week's introduction, the dogfight segment this week is a follow-up to last week's Second Strain segment, wherein I kind of took a mallet to a Facebook group whose whole purpose appeared to be building up their memories of what drum corps used to be by taking shots at what it is now. Now, to be clear, I don't always espouse the philosophy of if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Problems don't get solved that way. Constructive criticism is always appreciated. But as it happens, last week's trio section guest, Fusion Corps drum major Jenna Foley, shared, on Facebook, a post by a gentleman named Marco Iannelli, which said a few pithy things about the marching activity and about some good and positive ways to behave within it, especially at this time of year when drum corps' competition schedules kick in. But those pithy things, he said, also apply to the fall, when high school bands begin to duke it out for District 5 supremacy or whatever. Mr. Iannelli speaks with a little bit of cred, as the kids say, since he marched with the Madison Scouts, he was a brass instructor with the Troopers, and currently is one of the Bluecoats 2024 Fellows. Last Tuesday, the 25th of June, he wrote, and I now read, this: "Tomorrow is the first scored DCI show of the season, and that means it's time for some reminders on etiquette when talking about your opinions online. Number 1. Nothing is set in stone about a group after their first score. Slotting is what it is, but nothing is certain until all the corps compete with their completed shows in Lucas Oil Stadium. Number 2. A group is not disrespecting the past if they wear a unique costume that isn't the same as when you marched. You can have your preference, but for the love of everything, please lighten up. Which brings me to number 3. If you have a hard time telling who's who because of how a corps looks, it does not take long to look it up. Number 4. Keep an open mind. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's automatically bad. Number 5. This is a big one. You have a negative opinion about a show's design? Cool. Don't post about it. Talk about it with friends in person or on group chats, but don't post about it. There's not a problem with talking about preferences, but don't just blatantly post about how you think a corps show is stupid. Number 6. My comments are just about the design, nothing against the members. The members are still going to see it and can be negatively affected by it. I never want anyone to go through the bullying that the 2018 Scouts went through. Number 7. The corps need to toughen up and learn how to take criticism. Unless you are employed to teach them, they don't need your backseat criticisms. Number 8. A low score doesn't always indicate a bad season, nor does a high score always indicate a good season. Number 9. If you are on staff with a world-class finalist corps and you make fun of non-finalist groups or open class groups, how is what you are doing professional? Number 10. If a group has their best season in a while, or in their entire history this year, please do not frame your comments in ways that will invalidate those who marched the, quote, off years, unquote. Number 11. There is value in every show and every season, no matter what your opinion is on their design or their score. And to the performers, listen to your instructors before you listen to jerks on the internet. Don't let a score bring your mood down or make you doubt your personal experience. Have fun and work hard. Yes, I know that I make these posts and share similar posts like this all the time, but until the time comes where everyone knows how to be civil, I will continue sharing reminders about the importance of positivity and kindness. Let's have a great season. And to that I say, amen. May it be so. In a moment, we'll bring this episode in for a landing. Thanks for continuing to listen. To finish up this week, let's take the coda. For the coda this week, a brief wish list. The 4th of July this year falls on a Thursday, which means that, depending on who you are and what you do, the long weekend could start on Wednesday evening and last till Sunday afternoon, or longer if the traffic is bad. That means there's plenty of time to find a parade and go sit on the curb, and whenever a band marches past, clap and cheer and urge them on, because it's more than likely the weather will be really warm and the parade route will have been slightly uphill all the way, and the occasional slugs from a plastic water bottle will not be having quite the effect they ought to. That's, of course, unless you're actually in a parade, in which case, knock 'em dead, and may you be properly alive at the end of it. And there's also plenty of time to find a community band concert and go sit on a lawn chair and clap for whatever it is that they do, because they put lots of time and effort into getting ready for that performance, usually for, at best, no money, and most times having forked over more than a few bucks worth of band dues. It's truly a labor of love, so let's show them some love in return. And please, don't become the subject of one of those viral videos that shows a 4th of July fireworks mishap, one which could have been avoided by just not doing stupid things. Leave the banging and the crashing to the professionals. And by that I mean the percussionists. That's BandWagon for this week. Thanks as always for downloading and listening. BandWagon was written, researched, and produced by your humble host. Musical interludes were produced by Hammerton Media from source material largely by John Philip Sousa. You can listen to more episodes at our website, heyband.podbean.com. Please give me feedback. Let me know what you like or what you think might change. You can do that using our email address, heybandwagon@yahoo.com, or leave us a 90-second voice message by going to speakpipe.com/heybandwagon. Be aware that we do reserve the right to include your message on the podcast unless you say otherwise. Those contact links and links to our news items, conversation topics, and my interview guest, Joe McMULLEN, can be found in our show notes. Please share the show on social media, and thank you for that. If you enjoy this podcast, get someone else to listen as well. Word of mouth is the best recruiting tool. And to keep up with us every week, subscribe to BandWagon on the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please rate and review. It really helps other people to find the show. For now, take care, stay in touch, stay in tune, and we'll do this all again next week. I'm Rob Hammerton, and Stars and Stripes is up for the encore.